If you're a business owner and you're one of those individuals who believes that owning a home is a liability and not an asset, then you're not going to like what I'm about to say next. The number one way to build wealth and leave a legacy is through home ownership. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of disagreement with the next things that I'm about to say in this episode. However, I'm going to prove to you why, especially when compared to business, owning a home is your best shot at being able to build a solid financial foundation and leaving a legacy for the generations that are going to come after you. So we're going to actually start off with some statistics that come from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And they put out some numbers stating that out of all the businesses that get started, 20% of those businesses fail within the first 2 years. After 5 years, more than 45% of those businesses have failed. And after 10 years, 65% of businesses have failed. That's just in the 10-year period. Now, if you go to 15 years, there's only about 25% of businesses that are still remaining. Now, I know a lot of people who have LLCs. Out of all the people I know who started businesses, I don't know any of them who have built multi-million-dollar companies from the LLCs that they started. There are a small handful of them that have actually built six-figure businesses out of those LLCs. And what I mean is they've built businesses that are netting them $100,000 or more every year. So the majority of them are out of business. The majority of them are struggling to make it. The majority of them are putting more money into their business than what they're getting out from their business. That is business for most entrepreneurs. It's the sad story, but it's the truth. Most entrepreneurs struggle to try to make it, and most of them never make it. I just gave you the numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Most of them are going to fail within the first 10 years anyways. Now, let's compare that with home ownership. The majority of homeowners succeed at home ownership. Let's go back to one of the worst times in most people's mind in home ownership history, which is the 2008 Great Recession. So in the 2008 Great Recession, we know that there were a lot of foreclosures that happened on the market. But do you know what the highest rate of foreclosures were for any county within the US? If your guess is 12, you would be right, because the highest rate of foreclosure was 12%, and that was for Lee County in Florida, and that was based off of an article put out by the Pew Research Center. So Lee County in Florida had a foreclosure rate of 12%. Virginia, Manassas City in Virginia had an 11% foreclosure rate. And this is in 2008. Again, the time period that most people like to point to as being, worst time, at least in their lifetime in the housing market, when home prices just crashed down and everything was getting low with prices and everything. Everybody points to that. Well, the foreclosure rate in Lee County, Florida, which led the nation, was 12%, which means that 88% of the homes did not have foreclosures filed against them. In Manassas City in Virginia was 11%. In Merced, I think it's pronounced Merced, in California, 10%. After those three, every other county is in single digits. So think about that for a minute. In what most people consider the worst time in the housing market history during their lifetime, 12% was the highest foreclosure rate, which is high. No doubt about it. That is high. 12 out of every 100 homes, are having a foreclosure filed against them. So that is high. However, it's not 65% high. But nevertheless, after those top three, the count in Florida, Virginia, and California, every other county in the U.S. is under 10%. And there were actually over 2,100 counties that never even experienced a foreclosure rate above 0.5%. So over 2,100 counties didn't even experience a foreclosure rate that went above 0.5%. Now, I will say to caveat that more people live in counties the counties that are more densely populated obviously are going to garner more of, the foreclosures and more of the attention. So if you got counties with a population of, 1,000 people and, 12 people foreclose, obviously that's not going to move the numbers as much. But I just want to paint the picture that even when you consider all the densely populated counties and everything, most people are not foreclosing on their homes during that time, even though it's weird how some people remember like half the homes were foreclosing. It wasn't half the homes. It wasn't even a quarter of the homes out there that were foreclosing. So just keep that in mind, 12%. And that's if you lived in Lee County, Florida. If you were in any other county, it was less than that. So moving on from there, I also wanted to touch on home appreciation. Over the last 60 years, homes have appreciated on average of 4% year over year. So what does that mean? That means if you were to buy a $100,000 home today, this time next year, that home would be worth $104,000. And then the year after that, it would be worth a little over $108,000. So you can kind of see how that continues to grow year over year over year. So if you were to purchase a $400,000 home today, 10 years from now, at a 4% appreciation year over year, that home would be worth almost $600,000. You bought it for $400,000, but in 10 years, you have almost $200,000 worth of equity just from appreciation alone, not to mention the amortization, which is you paying down your mortgage payment. You include that in there, you may have right at or a little bit more than $600,000 that in equity in your home. But $400,000, you purchase it today, $600,000, almost $600,000 is $592,000 is what it'll be worth in 10 years. If you were to start a business today, there's a 65% chance that in 10 years, you're no longer in business. If you are still in business, how much money have you made in business? How well is your business doing? Because a lot of people do go into business thinking that, you know what, I'm going to do well, I'm going to make millions, I'm going to serve a lot of people. People are going to love the product or the service that I'm going to be providing. It's going to be amazing. And then they get into business and they see that all of the work that has to go into being great at business, and they struggle. They don't know how to find their way to actually being successful at business. However, when you purchase a home, and I want to round this back a little bit just to say, when you purchase the home that you are going to utilize as your primary residence, there are a group of individuals who don't believe that the home that you live in as your primary residence is an asset. They believe it's a liability. There are so many ways that I can take that, but to try and not veer too far off the beaten path, I'm going to say that I completely disagree that the home that you live in is not an asset. It is totally an asset. People who generally think that the home you live in is not an asset are looking at it purely from the standpoint of a financial thing. It doesn't make me money. It costs me more money than it makes me. Therefore, it is a liability and not an asset. But that is not how I define an asset. If the only thing that defines whether or not something is of value or an asset is if it makes you more money than it costs you, then your car is also a liability. And your children could also be viewed as liabilities. And there's so many things in your life that could be viewed as liabilities because they don't actually make you money. But they are what I like to call an asset bridge, meaning there are things that help you to be able to produce wealth, help you to be able to acquire and have the assets that are making you money. For example, your car could be viewed as a liability strictly from a financial standpoint. It costs you money in gas, it costs you money in insurance, it costs you money in your car payment if you're still paying on it, or in maintenance and upkeep. There's a lot of money that you put into your car. Unless you're an Uber driver or driving for Lyft, you're not getting that money back directly from you utilizing your car. However, if we were to take away your car, since it's a liability, then let's see how well your income producing assets are actually faring, or how well you're able to commute back and forth to your job, which is helping you to make money when you don't have that car to take you there. So again, even though your car is not directly producing you money, it is still what I would consider an asset, because without it, it makes your life much harder. And that gets into how I view an asset, which is the impact that it has on your life as a whole in other areas outside of just your finances. If it has an impact on you, maybe emotionally, maybe it has an impact on you being able to serve other people at a higher level. Maybe it has an impact on you in other areas of life that don't directly speak to the bottom line in your bank account. To me, those things still qualify as assets. So getting back on track here, when we're talking about appreciation of a home, the steady track record that homes have had over the history of the housing market, and you compare that with businesses, starting a business. And the reason I keep going back to businesses is because a lot of people either invest in businesses, whether it's their own or other people's businesses, or they invest in real estate for people who choose to invest their money. When you compare those two, real estate by leaps and bounds has created way more wealth and generated way more wealth for individuals than business has. Another thing that I want to point out is that when it comes to business, the market changes, the opportunities change, the jobs change, and in today's day and age, they are changing so rapidly. What used to be a great business to have 50 years ago is not the same business that's great to have 20 or 30 years ago or 5 years ago. We're in an AI age now, and you see how the market and the economy and the corporate world and everything is shifting to just try and keep up with the times, because everything is happening so lightning fast with how things change. It seemed like for a while we were going slow in the era where we had, everything was analog. I'll put it that way, whether it was the music you listen to or, listening to cassette tapes, record players, whatever. It seemed like everything moved slower. And then in a matter of just like 2 decades, we went from record players and cassette tapes to CDs to MP3 players to everything being in the cloud to now having AI that literally you can just speak to your phone and it'll just pull up what you wanted to pull up or answer your questions for you. I remember being in school and having to remember so many things about formulas when computing things with math, because one of the things that so many teachers would say is that you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket. You're not going to be walking around with a calculator in your pocket for the rest of your life. You have to learn how to add, subtract, multiply, divide. You got to remember these formulas in your head, because you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket when you're walking around. Man, how wrong they were, because we live in an age now where we have an entire computer in our phone, or in our pocket. We have so much more access and power within the palm of our hand than what we ever had literally just 20 years ago, 25 years ago. The thought of all that we can do in the palm of our hand now wasn't even fathomable 25, 30 years ago. But where are we going to be at 20 years from now? Where are we going to be at 15 or 10 years from now? Because things are moving so rapidly. I say that to say that you can start the business, but the business that you start today could very well be irrelevant 10 years from now, 20 years from now. It could have shifted into a completely different direction where now you need to learn a completely new skill just to keep up with the people who are jumping in ahead of where you are. Or you need to shift into a whole different arena if you want to maintain profitability in your business. You even look at some of the giants in the business world and how they've had to constantly, if they wanted to stay relevant, remold, reshape, re-innovate themselves and their businesses so that they can stay on top and stay in the forefront of consumers. Because if you see businesses that did not do that, you look at the Circuit Cities, you look at the Radio Shacks, you look at some of these other businesses that did not make the change. They were positioned to go into an area that we were going into. I mean, you look at Circuit City and Radio Shack, they were around selling technology equipment before we had the iPhones and before we had the cloud and everything. It seems like they would have been the best position to be able to take advantage of where we were headed, but they weren't able to make that shift in the way that they needed to make that shift so that they could stay relevant. And so that's why they went out of business. So when you're looking at business, there's so much stuff that you can start now with a business, but years from now, it'll be irrelevant. However, there are things that when you invest in real estate, 20, 50, 150 years from now, that real estate's still going to be there. What buildings are on top of that real estate might change. Maybe the real estate that used to be a subdivision has become more commercial, and now there are more businesses in that area. So whatever infrastructure is on top of the real estate, that might change. But the real estate itself, 100, 200, 500 years from now, assuming the earth is still around 500 years from now, that real estate's still going to be here. That's going to be something that you own, or your kids own, or your great grandkids own, assuming they keep it in and they don't sell it. That's going to be something that they own, because the real estate, we're not making any more of it and it's not going anywhere. Again, the dynamics of the business world and what occupies that real estate might change, but the real estate itself, having that ownership in that real estate is something that is valuable. It is something that is great to have. And I'm actually going to point to a scripture really quick. Not a specific scripture, but in the Bible, when God spoke to Abraham, he told him to leave the familiar area where he was at. And he said, and I want you to go to a land that I will show you when you get there. So he didn't even know where he was going. But he promised Abraham this land. He promised him this area. He didn't promise him a business. He didn't promise him a industry, or a skill set, or a proclivity that he would have and he would be able to teach to his children and his children's whatever. He didn't promise him that. He promised him land. He said, I'm going to give you this land. Over the years, that land is still something that God has been for God's people. It has been for Israel. Now, the business that has been done in that land has changed throughout the generations and the hundreds and thousands of years, but it's still land that God made a promise to Abraham to give to him and to his seed that came after him. I say that to say that even when God made a promise to give something to Abraham, it was something that has endured well beyond anything that any business has endured. There's no business that's lasted longer than the land on which that business sits. And you can think of your greatest companies now that you think will never grow out of business. There are companies that when we were growing up as kids, we probably were like, oh, that company's always going to be around. That company's never going out. And now you probably don't even know where they are. You don't even hear about them. And then you think about companies today. You think about Tesla, and you think about Apple, and you think about Microsoft or Amazon. And you're like, these companies, they're going to be around forever. They're never going to go out of business. And really, it just takes one company to come and disrupt the entire business model to where that juggernaut no longer has the influence and the dominance in that area that they once had. So I'm speaking a lot about business because I'm painting the picture that if you're wanting to create wealth, if you're wanting to generate legacy, something that's going to last for generations and has a track record of having steady growth, steady increase, steady appreciation over time, it does not get better than real estate. There is no better investment than you working toward becoming a homeowner. There is no better investment than you working toward purchasing investment property. And I think purchasing the home that you live in is a great place to start, because by doing that, you can get in at a very low level. You can live there, and then you can easily turn that property into a rental property and go purchase another property. And then you can get in at a very low level there, because when you own a home versus purchasing a home as a rental property, the costs are less, the down payment is less, the interest rate is less. So it's a lot less investment overall. You get way better terms on the mortgage loan that you're going to get. And from there, you can then turn that property into a rental property. So now you have low payments, but now you're getting rental income from it. You go move into another property and you can do the same thing with that one. Then you move to a third one and a fourth one. And before you know it, you've got a portfolio of rental properties, all with low mortgages on them, with lower monthly payments on them, and you're getting rent from them. And guess what? That rent is increasing year over year over year. On average, between 2 to 5% year over year is the average that you generally see with rent increases. But that is something that really just paints the picture to let you know that it doesn't get better than real estate. Real estate is the best investment that you can make if you are trying to grow wealth and leave a legacy. Great to start a business, and if God has put it on your heart to start a business and to serve people at a higher level in an area that you're gifted and skilled at, by all means, pursue that business. I'm an entrepreneur. I am a huge fan of people who take that step out on faith to be able to start those businesses and to be able to serve people and to be able to do the hard work that it takes to be able to build something of value. I know firsthand that is not easy. And so I am a huge supporter of people who step out and do those things. So I am not against business at all. I am a huge supporter of business. I'm just making a distinction here that if we're talking about the number one way to grow wealth and leave a legacy, it's in real estate. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. Hopefully this has been beneficial and enlightening for you. Do like and subscribe to the podcast. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm always dropping videos to try and help encourage and influence, not so much influence, but really encourage and educate is a better word. People in real estate and home ownership and things that are going to help them save money, make better decisions. And do tune in on Tuesdays as well, Home Finance Hacks. I put out a lot of information on Tuesdays that are geared more towards ways that people can save money when it comes to purchasing a home. And by saving money, I'm talking thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, literally when you go to purchase a home. So tune in on Tuesdays, 7 p.m. I go live on this YouTube channel, Home Finance Hacks. But that's what I have for you. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. Take care, be blessed, and we'll see you in the next episode.